Hey guys, so again, I'm Travis, managed by Q. So I'm going to try to be quick here. I know we have 4 people. I do this thing where I try and fit a lot of stuff into a very little space, even with titles. So that's going to be kind of a theme. So I will try and keep it pithy. So let's jump into it, right? I'm going to talk about 5 things that I think you can do to, effectively scale your hiring without driving yourself crazy. So we're going to cover everything from the point that a role sort of comes into existence all the way through someone's, 90-day onboarding, right? So there's a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to try and move pretty quick. And I'm going to scroll here. So here's the thing, right? Chances are, in show of hands again, who in this room works in kind of like recruiting, talent acquisition, or has in the past, or kind of, or is like maybe a hiring manager working with those guys? All right. So chances are, if you work at a tech startup and you were trying to grow that company, you probably feel like this most days, right? It's a tough job. It's exciting, but it is grueling, and it can really wear you down, right? I'm not going to try and make you think that at the end of this that you're going to be feeling this way, right? I'm not going to be a snake oil salesman and tell you I've solved all those problems, but I do think there's a way to kind of find an in-between here, right? So a quick disclaimer on that. This is about scale, right? As I mentioned in the title, how to scale your hiring. I'm just going to say straight away, some of these things you might be able to take tomorrow and just implement no problem. Depending on the size and scale of your company, or size and kind of stage of your company rather, some of these things, they may not actually be implementable today, right? So I would just ask you to kind of take what works for tomorrow, and then kind of bracket the stuff that you want to do down the road once you get to that point where you need to scale your company, let's say 2x through 10x, right? So let's get into it. The first thing I really want to talk about is it's very important to get your teams in the habit of planning out hiring in advance, right? So when I talk about anticipatory hiring planning, what I really mean by that is, getting all of the right stakeholders in the same room, having the same conversation before a role even comes into existence, right? So I'm sure if you are one of those recruiters that raise your hand, you've probably had this experience happen where a hiring manager comes to you and says, hey, let's go ahead and open this role that I just found out I got a hire for. Can you fill it in 6 weeks, right? And then you put the role up. Someone from finance comes and says, hey, what's that role doing up there? That's not approved for budget yet, right? Or someone from HR says, hey, we actually have someone kind of internal for that, right? So the more you can do on the front end to get all of these different kind of approvers in the same room, the better. What we implemented at Managed by Q at the end of this past year, which I feel really good about, is we do all of our hiring planning by the quarter, right? So in the same way that we are used to doing OKR planning, revenue targets by the quarter, we actually get together on a sort of a day, get people in the room and say, okay, let's look at the hiring plan for this quarter. Like, what do we need on sales? What do we need on finance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's get those ready to go, and that way you can sort of cut out a lot of this back and forth down the road, right? Second thing that I would really, ask you guys to do is get to the point where you are creating hiring competency frameworks, right? So get away from this like voodoo hiring where you're throwing, people in a room to be interviewed by different interviewers who may or may not know what the role actually is, right? So once you've done the quarterly hiring planning, make sure you have a good competency framework, right? What are you actually assessing on, right? And do your interviewers know that, right? All the better if you can tie specific scaffolded interview questions to those competencies, you're off the races, right? So something as simple as if you look at your culture and you realize that from talking to hiring managers that one of the competencies should be comfort with ambiguity, set your interviewers up to actually know how to ask those questions, right? Tell me about a time that you've received a project with a very unclear measure of success, right? Like, give them that help. They definitely need it. Don't assume that people just know everything you know when it comes to competencies. Third thing, invest that time and energy up front in kickoff conversations, right? So once that role is posted, don't just have the 15-minute meeting with the hiring manager where they tell you, hey, here's the job description, get it up there, let's talk sourcing, right? Rather, bring together everyone who has a stake in that role, right? Interviewers, hiring manager, everyone together, make sure that people actually know what that role is really meant to do, right? And what the profile is, and make sure the interviewers know, going back to those competencies, which areas are they actually assessing on, and which areas do they get to just kind of sit out on, right? Get that structure in place in the front end. It's going to save you a lot of headache, right? I'm sure people have been in the position before where you've launched a search, you've gotten halfway through it, you've brought through candidates, and no one is aligned, and you have to recalibrate, right? That kills so much time. Save that on the front end by having very robust kickoff conversations, right? The fourth thing that we take very seriously at Manage by Q, and we've really implemented this well in the past, I think, 6 months, is we designate a single person to own the candidate experience from the point of offer signing throughout their first 90 days, right? I was talking to someone about this earlier. There's a lot of times this false choice that people make between efficiency and kind of candidate and employee experience, right? If you structure this properly, you can actually be more efficient while optimizing the experience, right? I actually don't want my recruiters to take their new hires all the way into their first day because they have very heavy rec loads, right? But at the same time, I don't want that candidate to receive like a dark space, crickets, etc. once they sign their offer, right? So our coordinator, Sam, who's phenomenal, she actually picks up the point of offer. She's sending them care packages, she's getting on calls with them, she's inviting them to our all-hands meetings before they start, and then when they start, she's the individual who walks them through their new hire paperwork and checks in with them throughout, right? And what that does, it allows our recruiters to continue staying on the ground, it allows hiring managers to do their day job, and we know that while we're being efficient, that candidate is having a really great experience, and that new hire as well. And then lastly, and again, moving fast here, this is super small, but actually very important from like a Pareto principle 80-20 mindset. Have your new employees start on Tuesdays. Super easy thing to do, right? Why this is important is Mondays are probably the busiest days for anyone at any company anywhere, right? At the same time, most new hires, they don't want to go into a new job and be burnt out by the end of the week with like all the orientation and whatnot. Condense that to a 4-day window. That allows your HR team, your hiring managers, etc., to not have to hustle at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. And again, it improves the efficiency while also kind of optimizing that 4-day experience. So that's it, guys. Just like super brief, 5 things. Happy to chat later. I know this is like a lot of stuff. Hit me up over email, LinkedIn. We can chat more about it. But hopefully that gets you on your way.